Hi everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. So my name is Claudia. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction before we get into today's case. I am extremely passionate about true crime, makeup and everything psychology. I am currently studying psychology through UNISA and I'm extremely excited to be diving into these cases, doing a bit of a psychological deep dive and just bringing light to the horrifying crime that South Africa has kind of essentially buried underneath the rug. Not a lot of people understand the severity and the scale of South African crime. I think everyday crime is something that is part of our lives, so everyone is keenly aware of that. But all things serial killers, I am happy to enlighten you about. So serial offenders, serial killers, maybe even some cult things. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to do some deep dives on those as well. But yeah, today we have a very heavy-hitting case. So this is the case of Stewart Wilken, also known as Boetie Boer, or the Boetie Boer killer, as most media portrays him. And he was just a despicable human being. You will hear in the rest of this case, he sexually assaulted and murdered his way through a town in South Africa. But I do just quickly want to give a heads up as well as a trigger warning. This case does involve just graphic descriptions of child sexual assault as well as murder, violence against women, violence against children. So there also is some mentions of animal abuse. So if that is something that you are not interested in or that you might be severely triggered by, please click out of this video. The next video will hopefully be a better fit, and I hope you enjoy this and you might learn something new about the human psyche and the psychology behind killing and the twisted mind of Stewart Boetie Boer Wilkens. With serial killers, essentially what the psychology says is it all stems from childhood. Most of the time, this is through nurture and not so much nature. When people turn into serial killers or serial offenders, rapists, any of the above. So that would be the case with Mr. Stewart as well. This is the case of Stewart Wilkens. Wilkens or Wilken, I don't know, I don't care. But Stewart was born on November 11th, 1966 in a town called Boksburg in South Africa. So essentially a very, very long time ago. What's that going to be? I'm not going to do the math, but a very long time ago. As I said, in a town called Boksburg. I'm not sure if it was a big town or a city back then. I was born in 2001, so I don't have a lot of insight into South Africa at that time. But South Africa was unfortunately in a state of just moral questionability. It was during the apartheid era, so just something to keep in mind. Right from the start, Stewart's life, right from the beginning, from being born, being a baby, was essentially a nightmare, according to him. When Stewart was just 6 months old, his mother decided to abandon him alongside his 2-year-old sister in a phone booth. Now, I am very young, so I can remember towns having phone booths readily available. So yeah, that was a thing, and his mother just decided to abandon him and his sister in a phone booth, which I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that, but not a lot is known about Stewart's upbringing and his early life. That is quite private or just not documented, to be honest. I don't think they really thought to document anything those earlier years. But yes, Stewart started off his life pretty rough. I mean, at 6 months old. So what happened next was a domestic worker lady found him and his sister in this phone booth, and she then took them back to her employer's house. So the people she worked for, she took these 2 children back to them, which is such a good thing to do on her part. I mean, lots of people these days, I feel like, would just essentially look the other way and not really care about something like that, minding your own business. But yeah, she took them to her employer. And I would love to say that this is where everything goes well for this human being and his sister, but unfortunately that is not the case. At this point, things get only more horrifying. So not good. Very, very, very bad, essentially. All right. The man who took them in is known as Doop. I'm not sure why we have these crazy nicknames in this case, but yeah, everyone knows him as Doop, or everyone knew him as Doop. I don't think he's alive anymore. He took in these 2 children and made their life essentially a living hell. He was just a monster and a child abuser at that. Doop would occasionally burn Stewart with cigarettes on his genitals. He also made Stewart eat dog food from the dog's feeding bowl, which that in itself is just horrible. I mean, no child ever deserves to go through something like that, especially at such a young age, ever. It's never okay, but he was so young, and I can only imagine that this formed what was to come and who he was going to be. And just something extra heartbreaking is Doop would then give the children's food to the dogs. So he did not see these children as humans at all. I mean, giving their food to the dogs and forcing these children to eat the dog's food is just despicable. It's really, really despicable behavior. I'm also not sure if this man legally adopted Stewart and his sister. That's just not clear, but I can't imagine that he had adopted them. But yeah, just absolutely stunningly disturbing. So since Doop took in Stewart and his, or should I say Wilkins? I'm not sure if I should call him Wilkins. I'm calling him Stewart. Later on, we'll discuss his nickname and what the press dubbed him as, but for now, he is Stewart. So Stewart stayed with Doop for 1.5 years. So he was about 2 years old when he was no longer with Doop. Another incredibly sad and disgusting act that this monster Doop would put this child through is he would force Stewart to take part in bestiality. Now, for those who do not know, bestiality is defined as when a person has sexual intercourse or performs sexual acts on an animal. It can be horses, cats, dogs, truly anything these people will justify doing that to an animal. As Doop also, according to Wilkens, Stewart would engage in bestiality with his animals. So absolutely disgusting, despicable behavior. This man is just the worst of the worst. Can't imagine even putting a child through that, having a child witnessing that, and then forcing him to do the same to this animal is, I actually don't have any words for that. So this carried on for 1.5 years, and whilst this happened, Stewart's sister mysteriously vanished. I can imagine the abuse getting too difficult, or getting to a point where she just was not going to survive that type of abuse. And so she disappeared one day. Stewart never saw his sister again. She just up and left, according to Stewart. So at this stage, Stewart was not known as Stewart Wilkins. So the neighbor living next to this monster, Doop, I don't know, it's a crazy name. The neighbors living next to Doop, Mr. and Mrs. Wilken, took in Stewart when he was only 2 years old. And when they found him, he was completely malnourished, as we can imagine from Doop forcing him to eat dog food, not giving him proper nutrition at all. And he was also completely covered with lice, which is heinous. It's absolutely heinous. So they took Stewart in. They gave him the name Stewart, and with his surname Wilkins now. So I'm assuming they legally adopted Stewart through the government, through the system or whatever. Later went on to call himself Boetie Boer, which, again, these nicknames. I'm not sure who's deciding on these things. It's actually ridiculous. I don't know. He looks, though, and don't take this the wrong way, but he looks like a typical little boersinkie. I'm not sure. You guys, you'll know. But Stewart Wilkins became Wilkins now, and the neighbors were extremely compassionate about Stewart. They could not bear seeing this little boy being abused and treated the way he was, so they took him in. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done to Stewart, as we can imagine. I don't think any child would have a normal developed brain after that type of abuse. I just don't think it is possible. So the damage was already done, unfortunately, and from here on out, things will just get worse and worse. At school, Stewart also did not do well at all. He failed grade 3 three times. That was difficult to say. He failed grade 3 times. So you can just imagine the type of struggles he had in school. And yeah, from an early age, it wasn't set in stone for him to, it seems like life just didn't want him to be successful at all or have a normal childhood or life in any way, shape or form. So he failed grade 3 times, just really was not academically excelling in school at all. The other kids in school also made fun of Stewart for being adopted. They bullied him a lot, and this is all according to Stewart, so take that how you will, but essentially it makes sense for the way he started acting then, because he was apparently severely abused and tormented by kids at school as well. I shouldn't say abused, but definitely tormented and bullied to an extreme extent. So one day, Stewart was at school, and this really makes my blood boil because I also have personal experiences with the education system failing children in school. Stewart was essentially, I'm thinking, minding his own business. I can't say for sure. Sorry, I was just adjusting the lighting right now because I could not see myself. In school, Stewart was being bullied by the children this one day, and the teacher actually joined in on this bullying. And before I hear anything from anyone, I have also seen this with my own Christian eyes, and I have heard a lot of stories about teachers joining in on bullying or bullying their students. So it is something that happens. That's not shocking to me, but it definitely was something that just threw Stewart over the edge. He then proceeded to attack this teacher. Again, I'm not sure what he did. There's not a lot of information about what exactly happened, but he proceeded to attack this teacher and just let out all of his frustrations on this teacher. Anyway, so we have just this trifecta, just this absolute recipe for disaster for this boy. From an early age, it was just those cards were not carding for him, right? For the rest of his life. So he snapped, he attacked the teacher. His mother was extremely concerned about Stewart. He was getting very violent with everyone around him. His peers, his friends at school, his teachers, even his family, those around him, he was just getting extremely violent all of the time. Coming from a child's perspective, he definitely has some unresolved feelings and anger towards his previous caregiver, Dupe, whatever the hell his name is. That guy, he's probably bald. Like, I'm not even kidding. He's probably bald and looks like the back of my thumb. That's just how I imagine this guy, because life cannot and will not treat you well when you do those types of things to children. So he's probably bald and just the ugliest thing. He probably is that type of person. I can draw him from memory. It's not difficult to draw this man. Anyway, sorry. Those type of people annoy the out of me. So anyway, Dupe. What was I even saying about Dupe? Stewart had some unresolved anger and things towards everyone, and he is obviously lashing out because nobody thought to get little Stewart to a psychologist. Maybe he's going to need a psychiatrist because lots of issues. So his mother was very concerned about him. He also bit other children, which, come to find later in this case, biting things, he has some type of jaw tick, I'm thinking, because you'll see it gets worse from here. By the age of 8, it is said he was smoking marijuana. Now, hold up. Let's stop for a moment. Who gave this child marijuana? Why? I guess it's the 60s and like no one cares about anything. No one cares about children. No one cares about the way they do anything. But that is absolutely bonkers to me that you can give a child marijuana at the age of 8. So he became severely dependent on the drug. And he was now a little addict, which is so fun. Love that for him. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not making fun of him as a child, but he turns out to be the worst person ever. So I don't really care at all. So do with that what you must. Yeah, so by the age of 8, smoking marijuana, biting other children, probably giving everybody rabies, just a menace to society and a menace to his adoptive mother, because he also had a thing for her, in the sense he liked to bite her as well. Just a little chomper. He's chomping on everything with those teeth, with those 8-year-old teeth. So this is a part of the story where things get a little bit darker as well. In this part of the story, things do take a turn for Stewart, and I think that this is the straw that is going to break the camel's back, because Stewart was invited by a church deacon to the church deacon's house one afternoon, and according to Stewart, that is when he was sexually abused by this church rat, because that's not a person or a deacon, that's a church rat, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, up until now, this child has been through absolute hell, and it just keeps on getting worse and worse. And no one around this little boy is doing anything to protect him, or to get him help even. No one is doing anything, and that's just truly, truly so heartbreaking to me. And also in the same year, so sorry, I don't think I said, but he was 9 when this sexual abuse happened to him, and in the same year, his adoptive father unfortunately passed away. So that as well had just a tremendous effect on Stewart's mental health. It just set him back even more than he was before. This really was very difficult for Stewart. Really struggling with the lighting today. I think this is going to be fine. Anyway, just ignore if you see a change in lighting all of the time. Just ignore it. It's not that serious. It's not that deep. Okay, so essentially there's no positive role model for Stewart left in his life. His adoptive father passed away, and this is where the problems emerge. Anyway, this is where it gets darker, a lot darker. All right, so now that all of these extremely traumatizing things happened to Stewart, his mother, absolutely overwhelmed with him being just this menace in the household. Her husband obviously passed away. She decided to send Stewart to a reformatory. Now, for those who do not know, a reformatory in 1960 South Africa was not anywhere on the planet, honestly, was just not the best place to be. These institutions are designed to reform juveniles, problem makers, just little menaces to society. So it is designed to essentially discipline these children where the parents are not able to. This was also not the best place for Stewart to be, as he claimed he was also severely sexually abused by the older boys in this reformatory. So again, just, gosh, I feel so sad for the little boy Stewart, because at this stage, he has no one to turn to. He has nothing in life that feels like it makes life worth living. His only role model has passed away, and he is just being repeatedly kicked down by life and by other people around him. It's really sad. So again, just another perfect, fresh ingredient in the serial killer pot mix for Stewart, unfortunately. And at this reformatory, he was also occasionally locked up naked, which, don't even get me started on these type of institutions. I think we all know what goes on behind closed doors at these types of places. usually run by the government. I'm not sure if there's a lot of them left in South Africa, but I can imagine back then it was quite a common thing to have these types of reformatories as well. So yeah, just sickening, sad. But we move on to Mr. Wilken's tragic high school years. So after finishing grade 11, Stewart decided to leave school. And side note, a lot of people actually those days left school just after finishing grade 10 or starting grade 10, I'm not quite sure. But a lot of people, it was a common thing for them to leave school and start a job or enroll into the South African Army. I'm not sure how to approach the South African Army, especially during those years, because there's also just a lot of stories about abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental torment in those establishments. So again, Stewart decided to enroll into the South African Army, and just after 4 months, he was discharged after a suicide attempt. So again, not looking good for Mr. Wilkens at all. That is when he decided to move back with his adoptive mother. All right, so one day Stewart was partaking in festive activities in a nightclub when he then met his wife, Lynn. Not a lot is known about Lynn as well, so just know her first name is Lynn, and they met in a nightclub. And on Christmas Day in 1985, Lynn and Stewart would welcome their first child, a daughter named Wuanai. The names, I'm sorry if I butchered any names in this episode, I'm just not sure how they pronounce the names, as Afrikaans people have the gift of choosing the most difficult names for their children ever. So I'm going to stick with Wuanai. But unfortunately, having a daughter, having a child, having a wife, having a partner in life did not at all fix Stewart's corrupted and broken psyche. It rarely does. I mean, I always say that if you are planning to get into a relationship or get married to someone, make sure you sort out all of your issues beforehand, because having a child or bringing a child into a household where no one is mentally stable and you went through the trauma you went through, I mean, that's just another recipe for disaster. So he did not fix him. Shocker, I know. And Stewart, nevertheless, not shocking, was extremely violent with Lynn, his partner. He would only want to have anal sex with her. He was not interested in vaginal penetration. He was only interested in anal sex, which in itself is a whole other psyche thing, I think, coming from the sexual abuse he went through. He might have felt the need to take his power back, but he put his partner through hell with that, as it was more often than not extremely uncomfortable for her and very, very painful. He would also physically assault Lynn multiple times, and she had him arrested one time for possession of marijuana, because we can't forget that little old Stewart has been addicted to marijuana from the ripe age of 8. So just a piece of work, this guy is. It's about to get extremely rough from here. So now we get to a turning point in the story, as they got a divorce. I'm not quite sure when it was, but it was probably a very, very, very quick marriage, not at all something that he cherished or respected. So they got divorced, and just to show the twisted psyche of this man, he then vowed to never ever have sexual intercourse with a white woman again. And here's the kicker, here's the reasoning behind this. He was scared of it being his long lost sister. Just say, if you're not into women, just say it. You don't have to, like, that's not, anyway, those days it obviously was not accepted at all. And yeah, so he vowed to never have sexual intercourse with a white woman ever again, which I don't think they were complaining, but unfortunately he would take it to other disgusting, despicable lengths and commit the acts he has committed now. So not that great. He also got married a second time not long after to a woman who is named Veronica, a woman of mixed race in South Africa. So fulfilling his promise of not ever having intercourse with a white woman again. So Veronica also had 2 sons from a previous relationship, but unfortunately, but not shockingly, this relationship was also doomed because of Stewart. He's the problem. He is the big fat problem. Veronica's parents, Stewart's in-laws, essentially accused Stewart of sexually abusing Veronica's 2 sons. And that's when he decided to just up and leave and go live in some bushes outside. So I don't think this man in any capacity was sane up here in a right state of mind. I don't think he was living on the earth we were living in. But nevertheless, I'm not saying this is true or false, but it sure as hell would not surprise me if he did abuse those 2 boys. So in February of 1990, Stewart Wilkens would commit his first murder. This is the part in the story, unfortunately, where we are going to be talking about a lot of child sexual abuse, violence against women, sexual abuse in the broadest form, essentially. So just keep that in mind. This is where things really take a turn for the worse. The child was a 15-year-old boy named Monty Fico. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. I'm sorry if I am butchering that name and surname, but he was a street child, so a child probably abandoned by his parents, as Stewart once was. But this child was living on the streets. He was 15 years old at this time, and Stewart just decided to sexually assault this boy and strangle him to death. So that was the first confirmed murder of Stewart Wilken, and we will see in this case that Stewart definitely did not have a pattern he followed when it comes to the victims he chose. He had extremely randomly picked his victims, and we will discuss that, the psychology behind this choice, a bit later. So he just committed his first murder, and unfortunately he would not stop there. So according to the case files, Stewart had 2 types of victims he would target. Normally serial killers, serial offenders, serial rapists would pick one type of target and they would stick to that. But Stewart had 2 types, and he targeted female sex workers as well as just any young boy, essentially, young boys and female sex workers. So those were his choices, I should say, his preferences when he offended. So let's take a harrowing walk through the timeline of the horrors that followed. In October of 1990, so not even long after his first murder, he essentially had been in a fight with his wife, Veronica, the woman with the 2 boys. He stormed out of the house. So in between everything, remember I said he lived in those bushes. Only God knows how long he was there, but I genuinely do not care. He obviously came back to Veronica to live with her. So one night they had a huge falling out, and Stewart decided it was time for him to strike again. This time it was a female sex worker, picked up the 25-year-old Virginia Huisman. Yes, Virginia Huisman, to have sexual intercourse with her, but that would not fulfill his needs or satisfy him, as he would anally rape her as well. And when she complained about the painfulness of this experience and that she did not consent to this type of sexual activity, Wilkens strangled her with her own clothing and just dumped her in a schoolyard, which is absolutely horrifying. It's just such a horrific thing to hear. Going from this young boy that he murdered, now going over to this female sex worker, he is just a monster, truly, truly such a monster. In January of 1991, so a few months after he killed the female sex worker, he also targeted another sex worker, 37-year-old Mersha Papenfuss. Again, I'm not sure if I'm saying her surname correctly, and I'm so sorry if that is the case, but she unfortunately crossed paths with this demon, this absolute waste of oxygen, when he asked her for sexual intercourse. She demanded he paid her upfront before any of the sexual intercourse would take place. He absolutely flew into a rage, not getting what he wants, obviously, because he is a man-child. Flew into a rage. He strangled her, unfortunately, till her death, and he then sexually assaulted her corpse. So now we're taking a sharp left into the world of necrophilia as well. Necrophilia, for those who are not familiar with the term, is someone who has sexual intercourse with dead people, with corpses, anything dead, essentially. So disgusting behavior, gross, defiling someone's corpse, not even letting them have peace after you took their life is next level deranged. So in October then of 1991, he met a 14-year-old boy who lived on the street. He persuaded this boy to offer him sexual services. This boy agreed to have sex with Wilkens to get some money, so exchanging sex for money. And when the little boy, because 14 years old, that's barely a teenager. He is still a little boy. When this boy asked Stewart to pay him up front before having sex, again, Wilkens flew into a rage, just absolutely overpowered him, probably beat him to a pulp, and killed him whilst having sex with this boy. Murdered him whilst having sex with this boy. Essentially, Stewart raped this boy and strangled him whilst he was raping him. In 1993, so 2 years after this event, or a year and a bit after this event, another young street child, we're not sure of his age or his identity, was strangled and sodomized, and his body was found in a ravine, just hidden, just dumped like he was a rag doll. So this man was busy with just the most despicable acts anyone could ever imagine. In July of 1995, this is where the story gets absolutely barbaric from here. Stewart then murdered a 42-year-old sex worker named Georgina Bonizwa-Zweni. Again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that name correctly. I do mean all of this with the most respect. He murdered her. After he strangled Bonizwa, he then sexually assaulted her corpse with a knife. Again, just absolutely showing his lack of remorse and respect for anyone or anything, essentially. So he raped her and sexually assaulted her corpse. The pathologist that did the investigation afterwards on her body said that they found at least 20 stab wounds, which is mind-boggling. I mean, one stab wound, count to 20. Every second is a stabbing. When you see it in that perspective, it's despicable. It's absolutely horrifying that someone could do something like that to another person. This part is truly disgusting. I'm going to give a trigger warning for this. I'm so sorry if this is not something you would like to hear, but remember when I said bro was a biter? He decided to cut off Bonizwa's nipples and he chewed on them and ate them. So now we have a man who is a serial killer, serial rapist, necrophile, and a cannibal. So just the worst human being to ever walk this earth. So Stewart Wilken is now getting increasingly more deranged and violent with his killings and his assaults. So we move on to the next victim in this unfortunate case. On September 29th, 1995, this is when Wilkens murdered his own 10-year-old daughter, Uanai. I'm truly at a loss for words as to how and why he is. The justification for why he did it will truly boggle your mind. I mean, I was like, are you dumb? Like, truly, are you dumb? Or deranged or delusional, which I'm pretty sure he was all of the above. Answer number D, all of the above. He said in his own words that he was concerned for his daughter's welfare and that this was the best thing he could do for her. Are we just not having respect for another person's life? Or obviously not. Okay, so Wilkens then claimed that his daughter told him that the daughter's stepfather was molesting her and that there also was never enough food in the house. Wilkens claimed this, so again, this is according to him. And this sounds eerily similar to what he had experienced as a child, being molested by the church deacon and also not having enough food when he was just a baby. So it sounds eerily similar. So I'm not quite sure if this is the truth or if this is just justification in his deranged mind. It surely sounds like justification. I'm gonna need some more of this. All right, so remember when I said when Stewart, before he committed his first murder, he was accused of molesting his two stepsons. He got into a fight with his wife. He ran out of the house. He hid in the bushes. So where he hid, that place was called Happy Valley. Happy Valley, nothing happy happens there, okay? Stewart apparently said that when he was younger, he used to spend a lot of time in Happy Valley, and that is where he has some of his fondest childhood memories. So good for you, Stewart, but no, because he continues to then take his daughter to Happy Valley, where he is just being absolutely the most disgusting person ever, because Stewart then decided to examine his daughter, Uane, examine her genitals, and he concluded that she is no longer a virgin, which, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what this man's reasoning is, because he's so concerned that she's being sexually abused by her stepfather, but he is sexually assaulting her in this moment. Deranged and deluded and demonic, honestly. So he then said he claimed he then wanted to save her from a life that he lived, and he decided it was no longer needed for her to be alive. Wilkins strangled his own daughter and, in his words, sending her to God. This is where we are stepping into truly just a horror movie, just something that is so out of pocket and scary to even talk about. But Stephen, who's Stephen? Stewart. I'm going to call him Stewart, or Wilkins, because that's, easier to remember. Wilkins then decided that it would be best if he kept his daughter's corpse with him at all times, obviously in his home. So did no one question what was happening? I'm not sure. No one found this strange? He then proceeded to remove her clothing from her corpse, kept the corpse. He was sleeping next to her corpse, and continued talking to her corpse, which obviously this indicates an extreme level of delusion or a psychotic break in this person's mind. So just keep that in mind, that he's truly not all there at this stage. And when she naturally started to decompose, her corpse was now only a skeleton that was left. So he covered that with some type of cloth or something. I'm not sure. It wasn't really clear as to what this was, but he covered her skeleton and he laid her clothes out as if she was still there, and kept those clothes and just kept talking to whoever he thinks he was talking to, as if she was still alive. And he kept these remains for more than 6 months. So if we know anything about human remains, they decompose quite quickly. And this was in September. So keeping her body, he would have kept her body like over the summer. So she must have, the poor little girl must have decomposed quite quickly. So that's just disturbing in most ways and disgusting. So a few months after he killed his own daughter, he came across another female sex worker in May of 1996. So just a few months after he killed his daughter. She was a 22-year-old sex worker known as Katrina Clausen. And what he did was, essentially, before assaulting her, he decided to shove a plastic, I'm not sure if it was a bag or whatever it was, I'm assuming it's a plastic bag. He shoved it down her throat to stop her from screaming, where he then proceeded to sexually assault and strangle her as well. Which, side note, stranglings are difficult to do, or should I rather say emotionally difficult to do. Strangling somebody is really an intimate act of violence, and this seemed like this was his choice of murder, is strangling his victim. So he enjoyed the act of watching them become lifeless. He did it to his own daughter as well, so that's really disturbing to think about. And sometime between May and August of 1996, so in the same year, he killed the female sex worker. Another boy that also lived on the streets, unfortunately, came across Wilkins, and Wilkins sexually assaulted this boy, unfortunately. And when this boy threatened to go to the police, that is when Wilkins also murdered this boy. Stewart Wilkins had a sickening and terrifying ritual he followed after murdering the people he murdered. And just to be clear, he absolutely had no respect for these people. He dumped their bodies in bushes, not even hiding them very well, to be honest. I saw some of the crime scene photos, but he just didn't think it necessary or important enough to put them somewhere where no one would find them. He was quite confident in himself, essentially, for not, so deluded he never thought he would get caught, but that would be the case, luckily. So Stewart would perform a ritual with each of the bodies he dumped wherever. He would almost always go back to the bodies to commit necrophilia, to have sexual intercourse with those bodies. And according to Wilkins, he would rub vinegar and butter on the victim's feet to mask the scent from police dogs of these decomposed bodies. Butter? I'm not sure. Anyway, so he would do that to his victims, and he would also stuff the victim's anus with newspaper so that the larvae or maggots could not, I guess, in his deluded mind, ruin the bodies, because that is just nature's, is to help those bodies decompose. But yeah, it's when I first heard about what this man did, I was absolutely stunned. I could not believe someone would do that to another person, besides taking their life, just absolutely defiling their corpses and having no respect whatsoever for those people. And we have to keep in mind that these are mostly very young people and underage boys. The age range he targeted and preferred was between, let's say, for instance, 13 and 30 years old. It really is such a disturbing thing to think about. And the reason he put the newspaper in his victim's anus is to obviously prevent the maggots from infesting. But the reason was so that he could come back and continue to violate these bodies. Because I'm not even going to say he had sexual intercourse with them. He violated the corpses of these people. So that was the reason he did that. Again, just such a sickening, deluded, deranged piece of work this man was. But Stewart always, always, always denied having any sexual contact with his deceased daughter, Wuanai. But I don't think it's far-fetched to think that he is a liar. I'm not believing a word that comes out of this man's mouth when it comes to him having any sort of moral standard, because that's just not the truth. Is it? Stewart's probably dead right now. I should fact check that. Hold on. Because I'm not sure if this man... Is bro not dead? Ugh. No, he has to be dead. Did he die? Victims? I'm not sure. It seems like this oak is still alive. That is scary to me. So now we finally and thankfully come to the end of this case in terms of victim, more bodies, in the sense that Wilkins made a mistake, shocking, and he got caught. So let's talk about that. So on January 22nd, 1996, Wilkins made a fatal error. As we saw, he was just getting more and more comfortable with the idea of murdering and defiling corpses. The 12-year-old boy, Henry Bakers, disappeared. But Henry's mother was not immediately concerned for the disappearance of her little boy, as Henry frequented his grandmother's house. And we have to remember that this truly was just another life. Children those days used to go to their friends' houses unsupervised. No one really had any concept of what could possibly happen to their children. Now South Africa is just this infested pool of crime. So just keep in mind that it wasn't anything out of the norm for Henry's mother. Her name was Ellen. So Ellen did not think anything of the fact that her boy did not return home when she expected him. But when he did not return home by Thursday evening, his mother started to get extremely worried about him and about his safety. So January 22nd, 1996, I'm not sure what the date the week that was, but I can only imagine it must have been something like a Wednesday or something. So when he didn't return by the Thursday, his mother was extremely worried, and she decided to then contact the authorities to help her look for her missing son. So when Henry's mother went to the police, there was a sergeant, a female by the name of Ursula Barnard, who took the lead on this missing child's case, and she started investigating. So she had a discussion with Henry's friend, who then said that he had seen Henry with a man called Stewart Wilken. At this stage, this little boy, the friend, tried to ask them where they were going and what they were going to do, and Stewart had told this little boy that it was essentially none of his business, which is not shocking this world, because children do have a blind respect and faith in adults, which is extremely sad in this case. But this is finally where this extremely smart, talented, amazing, I don't know this woman personally, but she then connected the death of Stewart's child to him. Obviously, when she did her research and investigated the case, she saw that his daughter had passed away, and that he had also had sodomy charges against him from his stepsons. So his wife, Veronica, has the two sons, and remember we spoke about the grandparents being very concerned about their grandchildren, and they accused Stewart of sexually abusing those two boys. So he actually had sodomy charges against him on record in the system. So Sergeant Ursula then saw those charges, the death of his daughter, and kind of puzzled the whole thing together and realized that this guy was 100% a danger to this Henry boy. I mean, obviously. So Stewart was then thankfully arrested on January 28th of 1997. And at first, Stewart, the little weasel and conniving and scheming scum he is, seemed genuinely concerned for Henry and the disappearance of Henry, and he was eager to help them find Henry. So don't know again what the thinking process was of this despicable human being, but yeah, that was what he was willing to do. That was just his way of probably showing them that he had, or that he faked a slither of remorse, because he obviously does not have any. He admitted to Sergeant Ursula that he had been with the boy, Henry, but that he had nothing to do with his disappearance, which is so convenient, because said every perpetrator ever, right? It's not me. I just spent some time with him. Yuck, by the way. Disgusting behavior. Stewart was then released as he provided an alibi for the day that Henry disappeared, but again, not a shocker, this alibi proved to be false, and he was again arrested on January the 31st, so a few days after his initial arrest. Thank Jesus, honestly, because this man would have just kept going and spreading even more of his negative, useless waste of space everywhere. My foot cramp. Oh, my foot cramp. I'm sorry, I'm going to change the lighting again. Getting changed again. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. We get to the fun part of the story where Stewart gets what he deserves, which is, I'm not going to say that on here, but just all I'm saying is let me into a room with him. I obviously have some sort of weapon. I'm not going to say which one, but something very strong and very deadly. Let me into a room with him. I just want to see something. Keep him cuffed though, because he's a bigger type of guy. I'm not even, he's a biggish guy. So anyway, that was unnecessary. So this is the part of the story where the psyche and psychology behind this case gets absolutely just strange and terrifying, to say the least. Little old Stewart, was deranged in ways that cannot be explained by the normal person. And this case was given over to Sergeant Derek Norsworthy, crazy surname, but slay. He was in charge of the murder and robbery unit, and he was trained by the very, very smart, very intelligent, amazing, stunning, just all of the above, Dr. Mickey Pistorius. She was the first psychological profiler ever in South Africa, a woman. Amazing. Love her. Live for her. I hope she's everything she's ever wanted. And we have a change of flight again because it's winter and it gets dark at like 3 p.m. at this stage. Okay, so this sergeant, this man Derek, was trained by Mickey Pistorius, or Dr. Mickey Pistorius, I should say. So he knew what he was doing, and he started building a case against Stewart Wilken. This is very scary. I am terrified of this part. So the way that Sergeant Derek Norsworthy went about the interrogation of Stewart Wilken is strange, but quite genius. He brought in Wilkins into the interrogation room, and he sat in front of Wilkins with an image of Derek's own daughter at the same age as Wilkins's daughter was, Wuanai. So if I'm not mistaken, around 10 years old. And he then left Stewart with that image of his own daughter. When Norsworthy returned, Stewart was just fixated on this photograph of this little girl. And the sergeant took note of that. And that is when the sergeant made his first move in telling Stewart that he knew that he had killed his own children. And Derek also said to Stewart that he knew he went back to commit necrophilia. So he knew that Stewart went back to these bodies to defile them even further. So Stewart was just laying out all of his cards on the table and Derek was just laying out all of his cards on the table and essentially backing Stewart into a corner, because Stewart does not have a strong personality. So this is going to make him quickly fold, and that's an understatement. Stewart remained silent, and according to Derek, Stewart's eyes then narrowed into slits, and he confessed to Sergeant Derek, I should say. He confessed to him and said, quote, "I am sick," which, understatement of the year, buddy. Obviously, you're not who you think you are. And then he continued to confess to everything that he had ever done wrong in his life. Shame. It's probably the first time someone listened to that man speak more than 3 words, which it must be difficult. So Stewart's confessions were a bit erratic. He confessed in bits and pieces. So over the next few months, Sergeant Derek and his team pieced together most of Stewart's story. And he also confessed to killing more than 10 people. So, okay. And he also led them directly to his victims' bodies, which there's actually photographs on the internet of him doing that. And it is so disturbing and eerie to see him standing next to the bodies or the graves of his victims. It's just absolutely crazy to see that. I really wouldn't suggest you go look up the crime scene photos. It is quite disturbing, and it's just not a pretty thing to see. They eventually then found Stewart's daughter's skeleton behind the Garden Court Holiday Inn, where it had been for almost 6 months. So they found her body. And also found Henry's body in bushes near Algoa Park, just absolutely infested with maggots and decomposing at a rapid rate, which is heartbreaking in itself. What is so disturbing about Wilken's psychology is he had something that they called the jelly bean effect. And this part is extremely graphic, so just keep that in mind as I say this. The jelly bean effect would essentially be described. Stewart would prefer to watch his victims as he strangled them, so he would watch them die, but what he would see is their eyes starting to bulge out of their skulls, their lips would swell up, and their tongue would protrude from their mouth. So that was, he liked to see that happen, which is chilling. It's honestly chilling, and it's disgusting. And also that is, again, I'm not sorry for this man's behavior, because he chose this life, but I'm sorry for saying this, but at the moment when all of this would happen, that is when Stewart would reach his climax as well. He would just spontaneously climax, as this was a sexually driven person, serial killer. So a bit more about the psychology of Stewart and why he did what he did. Some of the most important things for serial killers are to have control over the situation and to dominate any situation that they are in. So for Stewart, he had felt inferior and not capable of doing anything right for most of his life, most of his adulthood. I mean, he had a failed marriage. The second marriage also was just basically on the rocks. He had an extremely traumatic childhood. He was addicted to marijuana from a very early age. He was just a real piece of work. So he craved control and he craved domination in his life. And he wanted to play God. Essentially, he wanted to have the power over life and death itself. He truly was just the real life boogeyman, I feel like. So in psychology, we are taught that the first 6 years of a child's life is fundamental in the way that their brain develops, the way that they develop, the way that their brain develops, the way their personality develops, what they like, what they don't like, what they find morally right and wrong. And the first 6 years of Stewart's life essentially was everything but great. He was abused, he was bullied, he just all of the above. So he never really stood a chance of having normal brain development and having that moral compass that most people have. Well, most of society. He was taught from a very early age that being cruel is okay, and that is how you get what you want, and that he needs to have that control over other people, and in return he would then receive control over his own life because he felt like he had none. And something that stood out to me during this case was the fact that Stewart did not have a father figure in his life. The father figure was absent, as his stepfather sadly passed away when he was still little, and he got severely abused and mistreated by every other male figure in his life. I mean, he was sexually abused by the church's deacon, which is incredibly sad and disheartening. And he was also abused by the boys in his school, the boys in the reformatory. So absolutely no positive role model from any male in his life ever. He also probably most definitely did not have any friends as a child, so he never was taught proper socialization. He was always on his own. So he was isolated and he was just kind of in exile from the rest of society. That's the way they treated him. So the reason why Stewart chose the victims that he did is something psychologists call repetition compulsion. He wanted to repeat what had happened to him as a boy in order for him to have control over the situation. And he also said in his own words that did the things he did to those boys because that is what had happened to him at the reformatory and what the deacon had did to him from the church. So essentially in his mind, he felt like he now had the power and the control in that situation. But something else to note that Stewart said is the same he said about his little girl, his daughter that he murdered. He said that he wanted to save those boys' souls and send them to God. So religious psychosis, I don't know, just a whole mixture of everything. And that was his reasoning. He also said that the reason he chose to murder female prostitutes is that his first wife turned to prostitution after their relationship ended. So he carried some resentment towards her. And this is all according to Stewart. So again, just keep that in mind. He also believed that sex workers were charging people money for sex, and God intended sex to be free. So he should be able to receive it whenever he wants, which clearly we see a pattern here with this guy, just absolutely deluded out of his mind. Also, he said that sex workers are easy to access and that they would do anything for money. So he is just the worst human being ever to walk the earth. So Wilkens then appeared in court on February the 3rd, 1997, and he was charged with the murder of his daughter Wane and the boy that went missing, Henry. I don't know if this is working out. As police then connected him to more cases, more charges were pinned to Stewart. So this was an ongoing thing for quite a while. In the end, Wilkens received 10 counts of murder against him, or should I say 10 cases of murder were placed on him and 5 cases of sodomy. Both Dr. Mickey Pistorius, the psychology profiler, as well as Professor Tuvia Zabo, again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying that right, but they both testified that serial killers like Stewart could not at all be rehabilitated and that he should never be able to see the light of day again. And sickeningly enough, even during the trial, Wilkens's depravity never stopped. He even excused himself to the bathroom once so that he could go masturbate when listening to the happenings. Essentially him reliving all of the depraved things he did to those people. On February 20th, 1998, Chris Jansen found him guilty of 7 counts of murder and 2 counts of sodomy. Stewart Wilken was then sentenced to 7 terms of life imprisonment. So never getting out, buddy. Not in your wildest dreams. Which, praise Jesus, because yuck. What a disgusting human being. Also, such a slay, but Chris Jansen, the judge who sentenced him to prison, said that if the death penalty was still active in South Africa, he would not even blink to give him the death penalty, as he felt that Wilkens did not deserve to breathe the same air as everyone else. So, because he would only contaminate it with his disgusting human being, his disgusting being. So, and during his sentencing, Wilkens showed no emotion whatsoever. He did not even bat an eye. I don't think he cared much for what was happening. And heartbreakingly, Norsworthy, the sergeant, decided to track down Stewart's biological mother. He found her, and he also found Stewart's biological sister that had abandoned him when they both were living with the other despicable human being, Dupe. He obviously has severe mommy issues, so he just broke down and called her mommy and everything on the phone. So to think most of this, I think all of this could have been prevented if she just did not abandon her children. But we can't judge anyone for anything they do, except for Mr. Wilkens. And yeah, apparently today Stewart Wilkens is still alive, still kicking, which is a problem. And he is in St. Albans prison, where he is apparently, according to him, being tormented by the ghosts of his victims, which, I really hope he suffers for the rest of his life and that everything comes to him extremely difficult. That's what I hope for him. And that is the end of this horrifying, horrible case. I think this case shows us the impact that nurture has on a child's brain and how important it is to look after our children and to get them help as soon as we see something that might be a problem, such as them experiencing being bullied at school, because all of these things can just escalate to something far, far worse. And Stewart Wilkens is a prime example of what happens when someone is just so tormented and abused that their brain justifies even the most vile things any human can possibly do. So just some food for thought. South Africa has the highest number of serial killers after the United States in the world. So this case happened during a time in which South Africa was just a completely different country. It was during apartheid, and so the cries of those little boys and the sex workers were not taken seriously. It was not taken into consideration, hence why Wilkens was able to get away with what he did for the time he was on his killing spree. And we should really take note of that, to always support victims' story and help them, help anyone we can. If you see something, say something, essentially. Thank you so much for watching this video and spending the time with me. I really do appreciate it. This is the first video I ever made, so I'm sorry if it was a bit of a rough one to look at, or some things just did not happen. Some things just did not work according to plan. The lighting was a bit all over the place. But thank you so much for sticking around, and always stay safe. If you yourself are in trouble, or you know anyone else who might be in trouble, please reach out. I will insert some helplines you can contact, of something going on, or if you yourself are experiencing something. Remember, be kind, always be safe, especially in South Africa, and don't forget to subscribe if you would like to see more of these types of videos. Okay, bye.